Hello and good morning. I'm Madhu Anderson with the Nature Conservancy in Michigan. Welcome to our final webinar. This is the fourth in a series of webinars that the Michigan chapter of the Nature Conservancy and the Michigan Manufacturers Association are partnering on to help talk about manufacturing and sustainability. Today, we're focused on practical tips and resources for moving towards more sustainable practices in the industrial sector. We hope to offer you some insights into ways your company can use technology, measure your carbon output, and become more sustainable. We have a terrific panel of experts here to talk about all those things. So let me introduce them today. First, we have Dr. Volker Sick. Volker is director of the Global CO2 Initiative at the University of Michigan. He'll discuss developing technologies for dealing with carbon and what is in store for the future. Following Volker, we'll have Aaron Johnson. Aaron is the Area Vice President for the Great Lakes area at Waste Management. He will talk about new practices that can increase sustainability. Then we'll hear from Mike Troupos. Mike is Managing Director at Foresight Management, and he'll discuss sustainability audits and other tools for measuring progress. Finally, we'll hear from Caroline Lethan. Caroline is MMA's Director of Environmental and Regulatory Policy. And Caroline will talk about how MMA plans to engage in the future in state climate policy discussions. The Nature Conservancy and the Michigan Manufacturers Association want to help manufacturers take the lead in their own sustainability journey. We want to make sure that you stay competitive and that you also help to reduce future emissions. During this series, we've heard from a lot of sustainability leaders, including those at Ford, General Motors, Hemlock Semiconductor, and we've also heard from experts from the National Association of Manufacturers, the Michigan Department of Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, the Nature Conservancy, the Great Plains Institute. We've heard from Capital Steel and Wire and the University of Michigan. Today, we look forward to hearing from our expert panelists. We encourage you to ask questions. Please place your questions in the Q&A function in Zoom and include your affiliation and name so we can recognize you. You'll have a chance to get answers to those questions from our panelists throughout the session. You also may see some poll questions pop up. You can complete those during the webinar. We're very interested in hearing what you'd like to hear more about. And finally, we're going to record this event. And we hope that you'll share this event with your colleagues and listen to it in the future for reference. So with that, we'll get started with the program. Volker, let's begin with you.
Thank you so much, Madhu, for framing this event, and thank you also for bringing me in today to talk about some of the work that we do at the Global CO2 Initiative at the University of Michigan. And just to be very specific here, what I would like to focus on today is opportunities in how we can think or must think about carbon, specifically carbon dioxide, as a starting point that we all recognize is a huge issue. We understand that the excessive amounts of CO2 in the atmosphere really have brought about climate change effects that even here in Michigan, even though we're shielded by the Great Lakes, we begin to notice those. And we have very recently heard from the IPCC with an updated report that to some extent, we've already missed the boat. We are no longer able to completely turn the clock back. We have to adapt, and nevertheless, we also can still do a lot of things to help remove some of the CO2, and I'll talk about how we could do this and how this is a great opportunity for Michigan as a state, and of course, the industry that is in Michigan already and industries that can be built. But let's first look at the bigger picture here. If we look at it fundamentally and listen to talks about decarbonizing our economy, we have to pause right there. We have to understand that we cannot decarbonize all of our economy. We can decarbonize some processes, and we've worked on these things for a long, long time through energy efficiencies and whatnot else. But there are certainly a lot of processes that just require carbon. Let's remind ourselves that life on planet Earth is carbon-based. So while we can find alternatives or alternative products in some occasions, mostly what is being made out of carbon today will have to be made out of carbon tomorrow, or we have to give up using it. But there are just so many carbon-based materials, our food aside, that just require carbon as a backbone. Imagine all of the utensils, tools, and support supplies that we currently have to deal with COVID-19. Plastics, by and large, is being produced by carbon that is derived from fossil sources, whether it's coal or petroleum or natural gas. So how do we deal with this, recognizing that ultimately, if we continue to do this, taking petroleum out of the ground or any sort of carbon out of the ground and converting it into products that decompose and end up as CO2 in the atmosphere, we really have a problem. So we need to stop that. So where do we get the carbon from? Well, there's a variety of opportunities. One, and there's certainly emerging opportunities in that field alone, we can recycle some of the materials we use. That starts from chemicals to plastic materials and more. But there's a limit of that, of course, because overall our economies are still expanding. Humanity is growing in numbers. And therefore, how do we meet our carbon needs? We can look at nature as an ally and have plants harvest CO2, that is carbon, from the air for us, and then reprocess these plants to make a lot of things that we need in our daily lives. Again, just with as with the recycling, there are volume limitations to how much we can make from plants. We cannot grow enough to meet our needs. We need space to live on, and we need space to grow food, and we need natural habitats that are just untouched for the world ecology to remain stable. So how do we address our carbon needs then is literally right around us everywhere. We can pick up the carbon directly from air. We can also pick up CO2 emissions from some industrial sources. The fundamental concept is we can collect CO2 from gas streams, including the air, and then feed that into value streams that give us plastic materials, chemicals, even fuels. So that's all good news. It's all good news in the sense that we can now sort of build a new industry that feeds into existing industries. So that is really good news because we continue to have the benefits and the infrastructure of existing industries, all the while adapting them to make them more environmentally friendly and also be more mindful of communities around them. But we have the entry-level piece that we have to build up. Capturing the CO2, moving it if needed, and converting it with new processes so that we can feed it into existing supply chains. That's an opportunity for Michigan. It is an opportunity for Michigan also because to make all of that work, we need zero carbon electricity or other forms of energy. There's a lot of effort going into that as well. And in synergy, renewable energy, so-called renewable energy, zero carbon energy, as I'd like to call it, and these carbon capture and conversion technologies really can jointly pull each other and push each other to grow faster than single-handedly alone. So it's one aspect of building on CO2 as a feedstock. And that is just, as I said, replacing the fossil carbon that we currently enjoy using. We understand that we need to stop as quickly as possible. However, that doesn't really create a sink for the CO2 that's already in the atmosphere. How do we deal with that? Because we make plastics out of it or fuel, that will re-emerge as CO2. Still a win, but it's not as good as it can be. But did you know that we can actually make concrete and drywall and aggregates with CO2? We can make exciting materials, just as this little, oh, you can't even see it. I'll unwrap it later. It's a solid carbon cube. And we can then convert these materials into permanent CO2 sinks. More so, we can actually use waste materials to embed and make concrete with coal fly ash, mine tailings, and municipal waste residuals. So there's a lot of opportunities where Michigan manufacturing industry can build up and lead the nation in an emerging technology that is economically exciting and direly needed for the environment. And I'll stop here and look for questions later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've actually received a handful of questions for you. The first one is, what, if anything, has the state of Michigan already done to advance carbon capture utilization and sequestration opportunities? What should the state be doing?
Yeah, that's a very broad question. And of course, the Governor's Council on Climate Change has looked into some of these aspects. But for example, there are companies already here that capture CO2 and store it underground. So there's a significant opportunity in the Midwest and including Michigan for large-scale underground storage of CO2. Now, from a personal point of view, while we understand that this is quite likely needed for a few decades, ultimately, as a society, we benefit much more if we actually use the CO2 to make products, because those generate revenue. If we bury the CO2, it's like landfilling, right? We pay for it. So the societal burden is bigger. But overall, I think Michigan can play a very significant role in that case.
Thank you. Of all the technologies the Global CO2 is working on right now, which one do you think has the most promise of reaching commercialization the soonest?
I think certainly the building materials are emerging very quickly. There have been a significant number of commercializations across the country that demonstrate that this is feasible and begins to be viable. And on smaller scales, the chemical industry begins to look at how can we make plastics. Some of that is already commercial. So it's really broad. And I think we need to look at where does the Michigan economy have strength, but threatened by, oh, if we continue to do business as usual, we will have a carbon problem. So let's figure out how to replace the current feedstock with CO2 as a feedstock.
Thank you. Has your research included investigating how consumers might view the safety and/or reliability of products made with recycled CO2?
Oh, yes. I think as engineers, we are often tempted to sort of develop technologies in a void of, does anybody actually need or want this? And of course, with anything that is deployed at the billion-ton scale wide, we better understand up front, will people be happy with it or at least content? So researchers at the Ford School for Public Policy at the University of Michigan have looked into consumer sentiment about these products and found that more than 2/3 actually would be quite willing to try out these products. But I think it falls upon us as researchers, but also industry, to be very transparent, to talk about how we make these products, whether we source the ingredients to, and what are the potential benefits and risks. We have to be really clean on that from the get-go.
Absolutely. When you work with companies, do you notice a common challenge across industries?
Well, it very much depends on what industries we talk with. And some want a replacement process to make the same products, but differently. Others have a waste problem and see that they can sort of partner with us to combine their waste with the CO2 that we look into using to make new products. Others look at supply chain management and look for, well, where do I source CO2 to deliver it to a manufacturer to then deliver it into the marketplace? But I think that's one of the strengths of the Global CO2 Initiative, because we cover the whole ecosystem from CO2 capture to conversion, making products, and understanding how it would work within society.
Yeah, very exciting. Final question. Will any of the federal funding that was adopted recently in the Investment in Infrastructure and Jobs Act be helpful in furthering your work at the Global CO2 Institute?
Indeed, it very much will be, because the infrastructure, by and large, we think about this in terms of roads and bridges and buildings, pipes for water, etc. All of that uses the materials that we are reinventing. And therefore, if there is a deployment mandate, a procurement mandate for advanced materials, that certainly would help us a great deal and would help us to deploy these technologies faster. So we're really looking forward to these funding opportunities.
Absolutely, very exciting. Well, thank you so much for covering all of that.
Carolyn.
We very much appreciate it. And now I will turn it over to Aaron Johnson of Waste Management. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Aaron Johnson. I'm Area Vice President with Waste Management. I think Volker was right. We should all measure our carbon footprint, and it should be what we use to measure progress. In my business, we like to say, you can't just say things like zero landfill initiatives and think you're achieving the most optimal outcome. What we really got to look at is that carbon footprint and reduce our dependence on carbon and virgin materials. I want to start, I think Randy was going to maybe throw up a couple slides. The first thing I want to say is, you can go to the next slide, Randy. So the first thing we did at WM. So what I want to talk about the first half of this conversation, I'm going to talk about some of the things that WM we're doing. Hopefully it'll inspire some thought and idea on your side and what you do. And then the second half of the conversation, I want to talk about some ideas you can maybe think about and some partnership opportunities. So first thing I want to throw out there is just a couple of weeks ago, we announced a name change. We're no longer Waste Management. We're WM. Being a fourth generation garbage person from the south side of Chicago, I still got a little of that burgundy waste management in my blood, but now we're WM. And so why do we, it seems small, but why do we do something small but have such a big meaning? So really, we're a sustainability company, and a lot of people don't think of WM as a sustainability company. Yes, we manage about 45% of the total United States landfill volume that comes in every day. But what people don't know is we're the largest recycling company in North America. We're the largest producer of renewable energy in North America, both on electricity and renewable natural gas. So we're not just putting things in a hole and burying it. We're producing energy, we're recycling, we're reusing. Also, people don't know we have the cleanest, greenest fleet in North America. We have 11,000 natural gas heavy-duty vehicles on the road every day today. And that makes it the largest, greenest fleet in North America. We've invested $3 billion in natural gas vehicles over the last 8 years, and we've invested another $550 million in natural gas fueling stations to make it all possible. For every truck we replace, going from diesel to natural gas, we cut greenhouse gas emissions by about 14 metric tons per truck per year. That's a lot. And we're reducing nitrogen oxide emissions by 97%, which is one of the leading causes for global warming right now. So we are WM. Think of UPS, BP, Dow, 3M. These other companies you hear of, you no longer think of them by their given name, the name they used 10, 20 years ago. But we are in the middle of a transition. We just announced it 3 weeks ago. We are now WM, no longer Waste Management, for all those reasons I stated before. So if you go to the next slide, I want to talk about, as the world continues changing, it drives us at WM to change. And we look at all of the avenues in which we conduct our business, our supply chain, how we invest in technology and e-commerce. You think of supply chain, we demand our vendors, we're going to buy goods that are recyclable. We're going to buy goods that are reusable or compostable. But we're also going to demand that the things we buy are made out of recycled content. Think most of you all at your home probably have a cart of some sort. No matter who your service provider is, you probably have a cart or a container in which you put your waste and recycling into. We buy millions of those every year for our customers. We went to our vendors and said, hey, we have all this recycled plastic that we've sorted and processed. We want you to make your new carts with our recycled content. So we partnered with a Michigan company, Cascade Engineering, over in Grand Rapids, and we sell them our plastic. It comes right from your home, the plastic that you put in your recycle bin. We process that out, we bale it, we size it and sort it by color. And we sell it to a company like Cascade Engineering, who then blends that into the making of their new carts. And so when we deliver a cart to our customer, it's made with your own material that you put in your bin. And we've now tagged that as an eco cart. Yeah, it costs $3 more per cart, but it's the right thing to do. We look at our logistics. I already talked about our investment in clean, green fuels. A lot of companies are waiting for that electric vehicle to arrive, and we just don't have it in a heavy duty application for long hauls and for the application that we use. And so in the 8 years that our competitors are waiting for that electric option to become available on a big scale, we went all in on the natural gas, knowing that we were reducing our emissions by 97%. We're not slowing down on that. When you look at the technology, we're buying technology to improve our sorting and processing capabilities, to help us capture more material as it goes across the sorting line. Going paperless in our business. I think COVID sped this up for all of us, but it should be an initiative in no matter what your company is, to go paperless. It's not necessary with digital applications today, and go to a more e-commerce. We don't need sales reps out driving around knocking on doors. A lot of our commerce can be done virtually and online. If you go to the next slide, as we look at WM and integrating sustainability through our 5 pillars, we look at, how do we drive growth? How do we mitigate our risk? How do we create programs that bridge environmental and social purpose? How do we embed sustainability into what we do and what our customers do? So just for perspective, today, sustainability represents about $2 billion of our total global revenue. We do about $18 billion in total revenue. Of that, $2 billion attached to sustainability, like gas sales and recycling. By 2030, we fully expect that this becomes a $10 billion market for us, just because of socially the direction the nation's going. If you go to the next slide, as we start transition, how does WM maybe become a potential partner in your organization to help you achieve your sustainability goals? There's a couple key pillars here I want to talk about. And first is the modern landfill. These aren't holes that you bury things anymore. These are really renewable energy sources, and they're high tech, very complex eco centers. Really, we've recently announced we're investing another $875 million to build our renewable natural gas infrastructure at these landfills. And when you go back to what Volker said earlier about measuring carbon footprint, a lot of people, when you think about organics, the most carbon footprint friendly option may be putting it in a landfill, where we capture the decomposition and the gas generation from that decomposition and then convert it into an energy source like a natural gas, where you don't have to use virgin material to make that fuel source. yes, anaerobic digestion is the most carbon friendly, but oftentimes it comes at a rate of 3 times the cost of maybe a renewable natural gas. And it's much landfilling organics in some circumstances, depending on where you live. Every demographic's different, and it's important to know your demographics and where your material flows to. But sometimes processing organics and converting it into soil, you're letting all that gas release into the atmosphere. So you really need to know what your options are and look at the carbon that it costs to obtain the goals you set out for yourselves. Another thing, we like to be a material gatekeeper. So yes, we're the largest recycler when it comes to processing and sorting different commodities. And we're investing another $750 million over the next 4 years to build out additional infrastructure. But we also want to be a provider of this material. So a lot of you are manufacturing new goods. We want to be the provider to sell our commodities to you, to integrate into your products so you can use recycled content in the making of new goods versus just using raw material. We're also finding ways to create business out of organics. We're investing in anaerobic digestion, coming up with alternative fuel sources. You talk about heating and kilns at concrete plants. We're coming up with plastic and fibrous type fuel vessels to offset the fossil fuel that they currently burn. Becoming a circular logistics company is a priority of ours. We're going to collect the material, process the material, but then deliver that material right back to many of our customers that need to use that in the making of new goods. We have large partnerships, companies like Kroger's and Walmart, who we partner with across all of North America, including Canada. We're not always the ones physically out there collecting the material, but we can manage the program, provide reporting on organics, and come up with the most carbon footprint friendly option for you. We partner with companies like Under Armour to manage their textiles. That's important to them. Companies like Amazon, we manage their cardboard. You can imagine all the brown cardboard that comes through Amazon centers, and we provide reporting on that. I want to talk about you. So you can flip towards the end of the slide here. I'm going to skip ahead for time purposes. Go one more. So what can you do? So just some thoughts off the top of my head. Leadership. I think sustainability starts with leadership. Sustainability is not always the cheapest solution, but it is usually the right solution long-term for our society. Is it truly a priority at the top of your organization? Does it start with leadership? Do you put your money where your mouth is? Is it part of your capital planning? When I talk about CNG, compressed natural gas vehicles at WM, those trucks, mind you, we have 11,000. Each one of them costs $35,000 more to purchase. Now, it's offset over the total life of the asset by discounted pricing on fuel. We save money on buying natural gas versus diesel, but we've made that concerted effort and we've announced it to the world that this is what we're going to do and this is who we are. Does your company do that? Energy sources. Look at all the ways you consume energy. Are there opportunities to introduce renewable sources of energy, whether it's the gas you use? Can you use solar or wind or water generated electricity? Can you decrease your carbon footprint when it comes to energy usage? Know and understand what materials enter your facility. Do you require your vendors to provide products that are recyclable, compostable, or reusable? Know and understand your waste generation points. That's the best place to segregate material and separate material to make it more manageable to companies like us that can then process that material and then sell it downstream to other vendors who are looking for that commodity type. Look at renewable energy delivery vehicles, whether you deliver products or whether your vendors deliver products that you make. Are you using energy efficient vehicles, whether it's electric for light duty, depending on what you make, or if it's natural gas for a little more heavier duty? I'd advise you bring in third-party consultants to analyze your current practices. Things like lights. Can you use natural light versus electric lighting? Do you use LED versus the old phosphorus lights? Printers, changing your default settings to double side print instead of single side to cut your paper usage in half. looking at the scrap you generate and saying, if we bulk this scrap, is there anybody out there in the world that could use this in the making of their products? Your cafeteria is usually a generation point of a lot of your waste streams, organic and recyclable. And a couple of last things I'm going to leave you with is employee education programs. A lot of times we don't explain the why. We slap a sign on a wall and expect everybody to read it and understand it. And I think we really need to invest in the education of our employees of why is it important. You know, if we're recycling plastic, why is that important? Who's going to use that plastic? Where does that plastic go? So your employees can feel like they're part of something bigger, not just compliance with a sign. And I'd advise you leverage social impact to create engagement with your employees and local communities. Tell your sustainability story through the eyes of your employees, the people that it impacts on the front lines, and help tell that story through your customers and consumers and how they achieve their goals. To me, this all helps improve your internal branding. At WM, we try to tell this story every day, and I think we're getting better at it. But it brings our people together to feel like they're part of a bigger cause by helping the world and the planet be greener and reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and on virgin materials. So I'd leverage you to use social impact to drive change. So I'll stop there and answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Aaron. The breadth of your work is fascinating. We received a handful of questions for you as well. The first one, do you see the market increasingly willing to pay a green premium for sustainable solutions other than disposal?
I absolutely do. We have many customers, a lot of them large customers that are willing to pay a lot more to do the right thing. But a lot of it's depending on where you live. You know, if you're in the East Coast where landfill rates are $100 a ton, you can find more green friendly disposal options that are competitive. Here in the Midwest, where there's an abundance of land and space, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what side you're on, disposal is relatively cheap. So some of those recycling options or greener options just become economically not viable. But through things like RINs credits and some other government subsidies, they are encouraging better behavior, and we're in full support of that.
Great. Are there trends you see in this region amongst companies in how they are managing their waste?
I absolutely do. Recycling is becoming more and more prevalent. I think with technology, we're able to sort more materials and we're able to capture more materials. And through our partnerships, we're finding more outlets for these materials. I think for manufacturers, there's a demand for you all to use recycled content in the making of your new goods. The next generation wants you to do that, and that unlocks recycling. I can process and sort all day. I can collect every Starbucks lid, but if I don't have somebody that wants to buy that material and reuse it in the making of something new, then it just sits in a storage warehouse. So I think it really starts with manufacturers and finding a way to blend that into the making of new goods, because I can go out there and find those commodities for you if we know how to use them.
Absolutely.
So creating demand, I think, is the priority.
Did your company evaluate your own energy use? What area offered the most surprising opportunity?
So again, we're almost carbon neutral, and our goal is to produce 3 times as much energy as what we consume by 2030. It's a pretty big, audacious goal. So we look at it we don't generate any of this waste. A lot of people think of WM and think, we're the garbage company. We don't generate any of it. We just manage it. And so we're looking at ways internally of, people are giving us all this material that has value, it has carbon, it has energy. How do we harvest it? And it's like making oil out of crude, and we're taking garbage and making energy. So we see ourselves as being a big player in the next 4 years at energy production. And we're already the largest producer of renewable energy. We're going to increase that by 6 times by 2026 through our investments.
Yeah, that's incredible. What kinds of activities do you do to engage your employees in sustainability practices in your offices or everyday work?
A lot of it's like I talked about at the very end there, is using social impact. So whether it's on social media or whether it's investor meetings, we talk about things we're doing within our community. So, ribbon cutting events, community partnerships. A lot of our landfills have golf courses, remote control airfields. We participate with the Boys and Girls Clubs, the Boy Scouts. So we like to engage outdoor activity in our local communities and our employees to participate in those activities.
Very nice. And last question, do you see opportunities for renewable natural gas?
That's why we're investing $875 million right now. We'll do $225 million this year alone and $875 by 2026. Yeah, absolutely. There is such a demand both at the state level, where we're generating RINs credits and we're selling our gas to other companies. But there's also major players like California Berkeley University. They're paying us 4 times the rate for renewable natural gas than what they could buy natural gas out of the pipeline, because they have a commitment to sustainability. So as customer demand for sustainable solutions increases, the economics are proving more viable for us to go out and invest in harvesting that energy. There's also becoming a growing market in the mature European markets where they're wanting us to containerize this renewable energy and ship it to Europe, where they can become more energy independent. So we're starting to send renewable natural gas over to Europe. There's a lot of interesting ways in how you track and measure this. But yeah, the demand is growing, and so therefore the value is growing, and it's allowing us to invest and capture more of that.
Wow, that is amazing. Well, thank you very much for participating with us today. We really enjoyed your presentation. And now I will turn it over to Mike of Foresight Management. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Carolyn. Give me a second here. I'll pull up the presentation. Let's flip these. Perfect. All right. I'll jump in here. Again, my name is Mike Troupos. I work for an organization called Foresight Management. I'll take you through just a quick agenda of what I'm going to run through for you. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Foresight and why we're here to talk to you about sustainability. Then I want to take a step back. I know that both Volker and Aaron spent some time talking about sustainability. That's a word you're probably hearing a lot more over the last number of years, and just talk about why is this so important right now, and why are so many organizations asking about this and engaging in this. And then we're going to talk about the supply chain. I think that a lot of the organizations on this call today are somewhere in the supply chain, and that's a big growing topic for a lot of large industrial companies. And then finally, we'll actually talk about some real nuts and bolts things that you can do that can help you be more sustainable, but also help you grow your business and be more profitable. So just really quickly, the big takeaway on this side about Foresight is we are predominantly focused on supporting commercial and industrial, and mostly industrial manufacturing companies come up with an energy and sustainability plan. I've been doing this for a decade, so I've walked down this path with a number of clients. I have some really fun and exciting insights in how to do sustainability well, how to do sustainability profitably, and how to do sustainability in a way that'll grow your business. We've been in business since 2007, so we've been around for about 15 years, and a lot of our clients are here in the Midwest, so it's great that we're able to talk to the MMA and the Nature Conservancy here today. All right, so let's talk about this. Like, how do we get here? I think Aaron brought up a lot of good points around like sustainability being a big deal these days, and I don't think that there's one reason why sustainability is such a hot topic. I think there's about 3 different reasons, and they all kind of overlap and kind of don't, but I want to address them each individually. So the first piece is we've had a big change over the last couple decades that went from shareholder economy, where the #1 goal of a company was to increase profits, to a little bit more of a stakeholder oriented approach to a lot of organizations. I think companies are realizing you can maximize profits, but if you just offshore all your jobs to China, it's going to hurt your brand. And frankly, it's also going to hurt your supply chain. And so not every decision that a business makes today, we're starting to find, is completely financially motivated, which I think was a little bit more of the case in the past. And so you're seeing this shift, and this shift, part of the result of that is organizations are saying, let's engage with more stakeholders. Let's talk to other people and see what would be important to them. Maybe our clients, maybe our customers, maybe our suppliers, maybe our local community. What are they looking for, and how do we provide that? It's good for their businesses. And frankly, we believe that the stakeholder economy will actually result in just as much or even more profits because you're engaging more stakeholders and growing a more robust business. So that's one piece of why people are talking about sustainability more. Probably a more compelling reason, and one that Aaron would definitely agree with at WM, is public companies like WM are facing a lot of pressure from the investor world. So if you're a public company, you're trying to tap into the capital markets, large institutional investors, BlackRock being the largest. So if you think about your 401k for your retirement, you can buy things like the S&P 500 or stock market index. A lot of those indexes are run by a company called BlackRock. There's a number of them out there, but they're the largest. They have trillions of dollars under management, and they vote on those shares. And BlackRock has come out and said that climate risk is investment risk, and that there's an expectation that companies will have a plan for the future, and that companies will understand the opportunities and challenges that climate change represents. And so what you're seeing is a lot of organizations are saying, if I want to tap into the capital markets, then I need to make sure that I can talk about sustainability in an intelligent manner. So that is a huge driver as well. And again, that Larry Fink's letter to CEOs, that was just back in 2021. So again, right in the middle of COVID, there was more discussion from him around things like sustainability than there were around COVID. Okay, so those are two big ones, but you might say, Mike, I'm not a publicly traded company. So like, why am I starting to hear about this more? And I think this third reason is actually probably the most relevant to many of us here in Michigan and just in general. And that is global brands are starting to create aggressive goals. And some of that is caused by those first two reasons that I talked about before, but like General Motors is a great example. You think about it, Tesla came out of nowhere over the last decade and now has a market cap. They're worth more than Ford, General Motors, Stellantis, Honda, and Toyota combined. You take those five huge automotive companies and Tesla is worth more than those five. And we all know that Tesla's not making nearly as many cars as those five are. Why are they worth so much? And the reason why is because of what I talked about. They're telling a compelling story to the markets, and the markets are rewarding that. So what's the response? You're seeing global brands like General Motors say, we're sick of getting our lunch eaten by Tesla, and we're going to respond by making our own EV commitment. They're going all EV by 2035, and they're going completely carbon neutral by 2040. And so you're seeing this not just from automotive. Again, you can see a lot of logos there that you recognize, anywhere from retail to manufacturing, et cetera. These companies are saying we want to resonate more with our customers, and we want to resonate more with our shareholders. And so we're going to come out with some really audacious goals. Okay, so this is how we got here, but then there's one more piece that we need to talk about, and that is, well, how do you as a supply chain fit in? And back to the General Motors example, we were helping present on a symposium with them, and one of the other speakers from General Motors mentioned that for every ton of CO2 that General Motors emits, their supply chain emits 11. So think about that. You're talking a factor of 11 times more carbon is emitted by General Motors supply chain than it is by General Motors themselves. And they're not an outlier. This would be true for Walmart. This would be true for other manufacturing companies and retailers, is that the majority of their emissions are coming not from themselves, but from their supply chain. And this is how the supply chain fits in. This graphic I really like. It's kind of cool. You may be familiar with scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emissions. You may not be. But basically, scope 1 and 2 carbon emissions are the emissions associated directly with your business. And so those are things like electricity and natural gas, your fleet of vehicles, et cetera. Scope 3 emissions are all the things that you buy, business travel, franchisees, capital goods, leased assets, et cetera. Those all count as scope 3. And again, the biggest one of those is purchased goods. You as a manufacturing company who are making something for a larger organization that's putting it together, you fit in that purchased goods and services. You're that scope 3. You're that 11 times more carbon emitted than the main company. And so when General Motors makes that goal of carbon neutral by 2040, it doesn't matter if they reduce their carbon to nothing. The reality is they still have 91% more carbon to reduce down in their supply chain. And so that's why you're seeing so many organizations coming to their supply chain and saying, hey, we want you to be more sustainable. And that's also why you're seeing so many of these different standards and certifications that are coming on the scene right now. And a lot of organizations are realizing, hey, we need to navigate this. Like if we want to win business, if we want to be competitive in 2021 and 2022 and 2025 and 2030, we need to have a plan around all of these different certifications. We need to have a plan about how we're going to align and work with our suppliers. And so like, let's jump into the actual piece. So I framed it. Hopefully you guys understand this isn't going anywhere. And this is a lot of organizations that are looking at this. And so you basically have two responses. You can bury your head in the sand and say that this is just a fad, or you can say, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for me to run my business more efficiently. And this is an opportunity for me to gain market share in a very competitive marketplace. So I would obviously encourage you to be the running dog and not the dog with your head buried in the sand. Obviously that's your decision, but let's assume that you want to be that dog on the right-hand side that's running free. Man, I love those clouds. That green sky. I can't wait for that to show up here. Okay, so let's talk about this. If you want to run, there's a few steps that we can take. And it's funny, I love that Aaron at WM mentioned this too, is his first step, because we're completely aligned on this. And this is what we find is most frequently the starting spot for coming up with a strong sustainability strategy. And that is aligning your corporate values with your strategy. What I'm not telling you to do is blow up your business model. What I'm not telling you to do is erase your mission, vision, and values. You are in business here in 2022. You're clearly doing something right. And your mission, vision, and values are obviously probably very reasonable. And so instead of blowing everything up, I would encourage you to take a look at your mission, vision, and values, and also engage leadership. So your C-suite and other corporate leadership, and say, how do we want to engage sustainability with our existing mission, vision, and values? In many cases, you don't have to make all that many changes. Many people's mission, vision, and values already include these things, maybe not so explicitly, but they can be involved. And frankly, also beyond just the mission, vision, and values, involving leadership is important as you start looking at this. We find too many organizations that don't have buy-in from leadership. They end up just spinning their wheels. They're not going anywhere. They're not getting anywhere. And they're just frankly just spinning their wheels and not getting any progress. So again, first piece is figure out, like, what are you trying to do as a company? Why do you exist? And how does sustainability fit in that? And especially back to my initial statement on multiple stakeholders, think about who your stakeholders are. Think about what's important to them as well and how you can fit and fill that need. It's not always about you. It's about how you can engage well with your stakeholders. All right, so you have buy-in from leadership. The next step is you can't manage what you don't measure. I say that all the time. Think about it. If you wanted to lose weight and you never read any nutrition facts and you never stepped on a scale, how on earth are you supposed to be successful? You need the data. You need to have feedback from your scale that's saying, hey, you're moving the right direction or not. And you need to know how many calories are in that donut that you're eating and how much that's going to derail your diet. In the same way, if you are trying to do a sustainability plan, you need to have your data under control. If you're a single site, this is probably not that difficult. You can just house it all in maybe a spreadsheet or work with a consultant like us. If you're a large company, likely you're going to want some sort of software solution for this. You might be asking, Mike, what kind of data would I need to track? Energy is a great start. Top of energy, fuels. Between energy and fuels, that accounts for a lot of your carbon emissions. You might want to look at waste and find those WM bills somewhere. You look at your social impacts, health and safety. You might want to collect data on your products. Also, your water consumption might be material. And then back to that same favorite word, you got to look at stuff and potentially even down into your supply chain. And I'm not going to tell you that all of you need to collect all of these data points. Again, this is something that you'll do in phase one, is understand what of these data points are important to our stakeholders and important to our business. Let's collect those and work on setting a plan to improve on those. So again, you can't manage what you don't measure. You got to figure out what you're doing and create a general positive plan around it. All right, after you've done it, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes. You set a vision, you set a mission, you have data, you've set a baseline. Now you're coming to me saying, let's actually let's do something real here. We set up ourselves for success. Let's go either net zero or let's just reduce our carbon footprint, whatever your supply chain is pushing you towards. If you choose to go net zero, I'm just going to go the extreme and you can back this off. The algebra is pretty simple. You have your emissions as the circle on the left. You have opportunities to invest in energy efficiency to squeeze. That's the middle circle. And then anything you can't squeeze is the far right circle, which is you can offset any carbon that you can't reduce. And so again, if you think about it back to the automotive example, it costs energy to bend metal into car parts. There's no way you're going to be able to not use that energy. You might be able to use more efficient lights, and that's the circle number 2, but the circle number 3, you still have to bend the metal. And that's when buying renewable energy credits and offsets comes into practice. So that is the algebra of net zero. Let's talk about the details of net zero. So the first piece, like I mentioned, is squeeze your energy consumption as much as you possibly can. For industrial companies, and this might be surprising to you, but the majority of industrial companies are seeing energy efficiency projects that are a 20% internal rate of return or better. Some cases, so that's a 5-year payback. In some cases, we're looking at a 2-year simple payback for projects, especially if you're talking lighting and compressed air. Those are massive opportunities for you to cut your carbon footprint. Controls, HVAC, pumps, motors, demand management, all that stuff is viable. If you don't quite know where to cut in your building, doing all this can be bundled up in a nice energy audit. So you could hire a consulting firm like Foresight or someone else to come in and basically identify all the areas for energy efficiency. Generally, this exercise, when we go to an industrial site, can identify anywhere between a 5 and 30% energy reduction in your building. So boom, right there, you don't have to offset anything. You're just able to get the energy efficiency. The next piece, like we talked about, is there's just baseline energy that you have to use. And so there's offsetting options for electricity, especially anything from renewable energy credits, which are low cost and easy to purchase, all the way into on-site solar generation and understanding how to navigate the tax benefits associated with that. So as you're ready for that, that's something your organization can come up with a plan themselves, or again, consultants like us who have done this for a number of clients are good resources to say, hey, we can look at these projects for you. And a lot of times it can be beneficial to look to a consultant. I mean, I love solar panel companies. We work with a bunch, but frankly, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So generally it's nice to ask a consultant, hey, is my building really good for solar? Because I guarantee you, if you ask a solar company, they're going to tell you it certainly is. Okay. So that was the meat of like, here's how you can really start to meaningfully reduce your carbon footprint. I want to start to land the plane here with a last piece that I think a lot of organizations forget. That is just telling your story. So back to number 1 and having a vision. I think a lot of organizations don't do a great job of telling their story. It's not a thing about like being arrogant or bragging. What it is organizations should be telling their story and they should be proud of the work that they're doing. This is good, important work that resonates with consumers and customers. And so this doesn't have to be a press release that says we saved all this money and we're the best. It can be just, hey, we reduced our carbon footprint. Again, in many cases, you're doing both, but most of the press releases I'm seeing from organizations that have done these projects are focused on carbon emission reduction, water consumption reduction, waste consumption reduction, et cetera. And so you don't have to frame it like the dollar side of it. Certainly that will drive your decision, but telling that story is something that's meaningful that I think a lot of organizations overlook. All right, let me finish with this. This is my last slide. And this is really this idea of like green drives green, and you can see the arrow up and the arrow down. What we find is so many people over the last decade thought of energy efficiency and sustainability as an exercise in reducing your bottom line cost. I'm going to put in the efficient LEDs so I spend less on my electric bill. I'm going to go look at my waste invoices so I have to spend less money getting it hauled away. But the reality is that's still there. However, there's this whole new aspect, this whole new avenue of organizations that are seeing where the future is moving. They're seeing where their main customers are, seeing what their main customers are doing. And they're saying, we're going to align with our customers. And frankly, we're going to gobble up market share. We're going to capture market share from our competitors because they're still looking at the past and we're looking at the future. And we understand that this is important to our clients and this is important to our prospects. And we are going to tell a more compelling business case. We're not just going to compete on cost and availability. Certainly, those are still major considerations. I'm not telling you that those aren't. What I am telling you is it seems like in 2022, cost it's pretty narrow for a lot of organizations. They're not all that much different than their competitors. And the same thing with timeframes. What is a big differentiator for your organization is going out and saying, hey, you have goals. If you work with us, you can accomplish your goals faster. A lot of these companies have set goals that, frankly, I don't think they know if they can reach them. And so for you to be able to tell a story around, hey, we're going to help you reach your goals and also run your business more profitably, it is compelling for you to invest in energy efficiency. So thank you so much for listening. And yeah, I'd love to chat and answer any questions that people have. I can't hear you, Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. That's a really interesting roadmap for the type of work this entails. So I did receive a few questions. The first, do you think there is such a thing as low-hanging fruit for carbon reductions? And do those things ever run out? Or is there always a new fruit?
So I certainly do believe in low-hanging fruit. Like I mentioned, lighting and compressed air are huge ones. Looking at your utility invoices and your waste invoices to make sure that your pickup schedules are correct and you're on the right rate. Those are all the low-hanging fruits now. I think to your point, Caroline, in the future, there certainly will be others. I think LED, at some point, every business will have LED because it's so compelling of a value proposition. But by then you might find solar goes from a 5 or 6 year payback down to a 1 or 2 year payback. So what I'm saying is technology is constantly evolving, and the technologies for efficiency typically are moving towards the trend of getting less expensive and more efficient, which is a great trend. So the short answer is I don't think we're going to run out of low-hanging fruit, but I certainly know what the low-hanging fruit is for right now.
Good. All right, next, what is the easiest, cheapest first step for companies to take to improve their sustainability?
Yeah, like I mentioned in the roadmap, I mean, it is really low cost to just take a minute with leadership and say, is this something that's important to our stakeholders? And I'm not going to tell you the answer is always yes. I would say most of our clients that we talk to, it is to some level, but there are a lot of clients we know and do minor work with that are pretty far embedded in the supply chain and haven't really felt any pressure. And so I would say the first step would be doing that assessment, taking some time to strategically think, talk to your salespeople. Are they getting asked to fill out customer requests? Talk to these other stakeholders and say, are these things that we're hearing are important? If they are, that will help you focus your efforts. And to your point, make it the lowest cost implementation. If you just want to talk about straight carbon reduction and you're a manufacturer, you need LED lights in your building and you need to make sure that your air system is efficient and not leaking. Those two pieces are very fast paybacks and are often, unfortunately, overlooked by mid and small manufacturers.
Sure, fair point. Final question, in the companies that you've worked with so far, what was their biggest challenge in measuring their greenhouse gas emissions?
Finding all of the data and centralizing it in one spot. So, and some of our clients span the globe. So they may have 20 or 30 locations globally. Others have one location here in Michigan. Obviously the struggles for each vary, but the biggest piece is, especially if you have multiple sites, is how do we get all this data? People are busy. Manufacturing companies are good at building things. They may not necessarily be good at tracking utilities and consolidating all of this in an easy singular spot. And so I would encourage organizations to think about how you organizing your data. If you don't have a good solution, like we offer them and a ton of other consultants offer solutions where we assist in collecting all of the data and consolidating it in one singular spot, which then obviously you can calculate your carbon emissions more easily. And I'll say it's not just electricity and natural gas that associate your carbon emissions. You might have a large vehicle fleet. You may have propane high-lows. You may have refrigerants and weld gases. There's a lot of other metrics that I think clients may not realize contribute to their greenhouse gas emissions.
Fair enough. Thank you. That's really enlightening. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really helpful. All right. Well, again, I'm Caroline Leafin, MMA's Director of Environmental and Regulatory Policy. I want to encourage you to continue putting your questions using the chat or QA buttons on Zoom. If we receive any additional questions, I'll get to those in just a moment. So first, let me say how much we welcome and appreciate this chance to partner with the Nature Conservancy to find ways for our manufacturers to deal with the coming pressures to address emissions from regulations, customers, and a younger labor force more committed to sustainability. I also want to thank Madhu, Volker, Aaron, and Mike for being with us today. I'd also like to give you some background on the state's Healthy Climate Plan. So as you might be aware, public comment was due yesterday, close of business. And so I'm sure a lot of people on this call have submitted public comment, as did I. So on behalf of MMA, I submitted comment that we obviously look forward to continuing to work with Eagle in shaping the plan. It was drafted as a living document, and we are eager to continue that work and implement the resulting policy. I also pointed out that we want to ensure that successfully achieving the plan's goals means bolstering Michigan's economic competitiveness. Obviously, manufacturers depend on safe, reliable, affordable, and environmentally sound energy on a daily basis to operate. So towards that end, I also suggested an economy-wide decarbonization pathway analysis to understand all the options available to us as we work to achieve decarbonization in an efficient manner. So with that, it doesn't appear that we've received any additional questions. So I will pass it over to Madhu for wrap up.
Here I am. Got a very technical system here. Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for our panelists. They had some really inspiring comments and really good suggestions and strategies to follow. Thank you too to all of you who've joined us today. We really appreciate your participation. As we noted when we started, we have recorded these sessions, and so you'll be able to share these with your colleagues or go back if you have want to revisit some of the presentations. And thank you, Caroline, for the Michigan Manufacturers Association's commitment to this topic and partnering with us on these sessions. We continue to welcome your feedback. We also would welcome any opportunities you might have to help us work together for a more sustainable future for our state. So thank you again for participating, and enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.